What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Made You a Mixtape podcast. To everyone that's been listening so far along this journey, thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're listening to us on any of the audio streaming platforms that you can find us on. Joining me today on the show, really good friend, broadcaster, storyteller, social media maven, athlete relations. Literally, I don't think there's really a job she hasn't done. Madison Koekkoek, welcome to Made You a Mixtape. How are you doing?
I'm honored that you'd have me. I'm great. How are you, Wes?
I'm doing really good. So I mentioned you've had, quite the career journey already. Kind of walk us through, the path so far.
Yeah, I've taken, everyone in our business in sports media takes a different path, and that's what makes it so diverse and important, really, all the perspectives that come along. But mine is a little bit different. My education at the core was a political science degree at Queen's, and then a master's in health policy. It was as I was wrapping that up that I said, I have to do something fun. I have to be in hockey. So my first job in the business was in athlete relations at Upper Deck, the hockey card company. So just coming out of university, moving to San Diego, flying all over North America to meet with players and agents around signing hockey cards. It was a bit of a dream come true. I look back and think, how in the heck did I score that? That really led to wanting to pursue the storytelling side of it and do the stories of these athletes and their families justice. And so that's then when you and I collided at the College of Sports Media. And being in Toronto for the 2 years that I was really changed everything for me. It's a hustle that I don't know I could ever keep up to again. If you look behind me, the accreditations in the frame represent some really crazy experiences and places that I found myself and people that I learned from. So I think I can't not mention that notion of the crazy hustle and the people it brought me to and the lessons that I learned along the way there. It ultimately led to a role at Hockey Canada, leading social media. And now on to what will be my next step in the journey, which I'm hoping to be able to share here soon in the next week or so. It's been a crazy ride. As you know, there are many ups and downs, but what makes it worth it and what makes it really rewarding are truly the humans you meet along the way, and you are one of those.
Thank you. It's always been a pleasure to spend time and be able to work with you. One of the things that maybe people don't really understand when they're thinking about getting into a broadcasting career or any kind of career for that matter, based on whether it be sports or broadcasting or even social media these days, is that it's almost a very nomadic lifestyle, because you went from where you're born to San Diego to Toronto to Calgary. How do you juggle the fact that it takes a while to get to a point in your career where you can finally call a place home?
Yeah, love that question, because it really is. And you think about it a lot, about some of the moments you're missing out on with your family, your loved ones. It's about building friendships in different places and then having to leave. I think we're really lucky in this day and age to have social media like we do, to be able to keep in touch with everybody, no matter where we are. I always say most of my closest friends are scattered all over the world. We've never all been in the same room together, and who knows when we'll see each other again. But it really, as things start to take shape now, and it's those small things, those small pieces of home you take for granted. Family is one thing and mom's cooking, but having that routine and having that sense of community, even hanging pictures on the wall because you're staying in an apartment for longer than a year or contract period, having your favorite local pizza joint that will always be there, not having to find a new one every couple months. Those are the things that I've found as I get so old and wise, make a real difference for me. And as I think about what my next step is, even, um, I'm truly grateful for, I think COVID gave us the gift of this idea of remote work. And it doesn't matter for the most part where you are. This past year, it's productivity hasn't gone down. It's in fact gone up for most people. Um, and we haven't had FaceTime with colleagues. So I think that's telling, or you and I right now are talking on Zoom. Could we have could I have been a guest on your show in pre-COVID times where we maybe didn't think about using video conferencing to the same extent? So that's really a gift. And in the world of social media and broadcasting, I think it's only going to be a bigger game changer in terms of the quality and the diversity that's able to come into the craft.
One of the more common knocks on the idea of working from home, at least from maybe the employer standpoint, was that they're just going to be home, they're not going to work hard and whatnot. And then all of a sudden we get thrust into you're going to work from home now, whether you like it or not. How much self motivation do you have to have, and how much has that self motivation that you do possess carried you through through San Diego, through Toronto, through Calgary?
Oh, well, through the working from home business, it was interesting. I remember the first week with the roller coaster that it was. I remember feeling so drained. And one afternoon, napping and thinking, oh my God, it's work hours and I had to have a nap. And now a year later, after going through that roller coaster of then working like 18-hour days sometimes, stuck nailed to your computer because there is no physical barrier of I'm leaving work now. So that was all a really big adjustment. But what I brought from that in moving across the country or across the continent at a young age, and even just my general kind of like independent nature, I'm motivated by a lot of different factors. And so for me, I think it comes from being a lifelong athlete. The team that I work for and with, that's my motivator. It's not letting them down. So I don't have to wake, if I'm working for a team that I love and value and cherish, and they feel the same about me, it's not even a question of why am I getting out of bed in the morning, or why am I putting in our business, why do we put in these crazy hours? It's for each other and to lift each other higher. So I think that's from being a lifelong athlete, and that's what motivates me. But by that same token, it's having seen my parents work the way that they do, and really loving what they do in their careers, and casting those values onto my brother and I.
Now, you mentioned your brother and you mentioned your family. If anyone hasn't, recognized the last name of Koekkoek yet, of course, your brother Slater is playing with the Edmonton Oilers, which when it gets to, either traveling around as much as you have, chasing career dreams, and for him, going from Tampa to Chicago to, to Edmonton, and to obviously, playing in the minors as well, there has to be a lot of support, from the parent side of any of that. How important was that support from your parents?
Yeah, we often talk about, and when you shape it that way, and kind of, we've talked about all these cities and places, our family time looks a little bit different, and we're incredibly grateful for that. Whether it be Easter, Thanksgiving, any given holiday, it's not necessarily finding our way home, though it's been more so of that as of late. It's where can we find each other? And my mom does an incredible job at mimicking whatever the traditions of those holidays might be in a hotel room. So finding somewhere that might make us turkey dinner to order in, whatever else it might be. That's how, packing a small Christmas tree in her suitcase. It's those things that she's worked really hard to kind of keep the traditions there. And what we've realized is our tradition is just making it happen and being together every year. Their support every single day is everything. There's a lot of, both my parents work jobs that weren't in this realm of crazy travel, instability. Like my mom is a registered nurse and my dad works the electrical utility. And so being in a small town, those jobs and those career paths, once they were set out. So both of us pursuing careers in very uncertain, high risk, high reward industries, it's new for all of us. So there are a lot of things in our family group chat where we're teaching each other, or we're really reflecting on how this represents our values as humans, where we're learning kind of the not so nice side of this business, where, we're just unconditionally supportive of one another. And I think that's been absolutely paramount and something I'm grateful for every single day.
You mentioned kind of like the downside of the business, and let's be honest, every day, seemingly almost every day, we're seeing stories of women in sports media being mistreated, being basically, getting death threats. Like it's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. So for someone who is, female and working in sports social media, how much of that have you had to deal with, and how hard is that to kind of shrug it off?
Yeah, it's that old thing. You'll get a million positive comments and it's the one that you just stir on all day. I've been really lucky. And I acknowledge my privilege in saying this. And it's why I feel so important about really bridging that gap. I know where I fit in terms of that boys club and in bridging that, whether it be for women or BIPOC community or people who are underrepresented in our business. And that's why I feel so strongly to truly make it different, for people to follow me. And that doesn't mean it's easy. You see wins, you see successes all over social media. You don't see the teary nights and the wanting to give up again in the family group chat, or wondering if you should, wondering if it's worth it, all these kinds of things. Parents being super protective and saying, that's enough, do something normal. So I've been really lucky. In saying that, there's not one of us who's made it in the business, is making it in the business, or is up and coming that doesn't have stories. And I recently shared one of my most shocking, I guess you could say, stories of not being allowed on a team bus, and being told it was for the reason that I was a new face and a distraction to the team. And I didn't plan to tell that until I was, on the back nine of my career. But I thought that's not doing it any justice. And because you'd start to find yourself in that cycle of justifying it, or, oh, it really wasn't that bad. I wasn't sexually assaulted, or it wasn't this, I wasn't that. It was just that I wasn't allowed on the bus. I was just discriminated against. And then when you do that and you start in that cycle, it's like, okay, it was very wrong for sure now. So we all have those stories. And as I said, when I told that one for the first time, it taught me a ton about using my resources and my supports, and then being there for other people who may experience similar or worse occurrences.
Now, we had as a previous guest on the podcast, Katie Caldwell, who you know as well, and both of you have been involved in the organization Galvanize, which is a phenomenal organization. Katie told us a little bit about that. When you were working with Galvanize, did they discuss and prepare you for the crap that you as a woman covering sports we're going to have to deal with?
Yeah, it's so Galvanize is a network we're really lucky to have. We do annual events and coaching with NFL rookies. That has since bridged into working with the women of the PWHPA. But beyond that, it's a network, 365 days a year of support. And so when different things happen in our business, we now have infinite comrades, and really we're just changing that perspective that there's a seat at the table for all of us and not just the one seat and that we have to then compete. We have all of these people to go to reflect, to vent, to share stories, which is cathartic and really therapeutic. When big days happen in the media, we have group calls to walk through it and again, share experiences and stories. And oftentimes, and I'm infinitely grateful to Laura Oakman, the leader and founder of Galvanize, for being on the other end of the phone calls when different things happen and helping guide us through how, using her experience and her wisdom and her many stories, how to tackle it. Because it's not always as simple as telling someone in HR or quitting your job or whatever else it might be. There are a lot of factors at play. You've worked very hard to be where you are, and you should be there and deserve to be there. So how do you navigate it properly as to not face repercussion?
When looking at getting into an organization, or not an organization, but a career that is, as you know, for lack of a better term, competitive, ruthless, I would say exclusionary, but it's hard to break in sometimes. How important is it to have a mentor of that stature for someone just coming up?
Very, and I have many. I am very, very fortunate to have built incredible relationships with many mentors. And those aren't things that just happen or that anyone is entitled to. It's a very careful navigation of trust and really connecting. I hate the word networking because to me it's connection and relationships, and that's what makes these mentorships really strong. Sometimes there might be formal mentorships in place through different companies, but then oftentimes too, it's through again, building that relationship. So those are, while in our business, as you said, which can be ruthless, and sometimes it's a support thing of like, how did you deal with this toxic aspect of our world? But other times it's literally people sticking their neck out for you to get you in and to get you a job, which you earn and deserve. But it's really, really hard to get that through. So that is my number one. When I first started and left San Diego and decided I was going the media route, I made a list of no less than 150 people in the business that I wanted to connect with, some of which I had a direct line, others none at all. And I slowly made my way through that list. And when I connected, it was the infamous pick your brain, but it was oftentimes more than that. And it turned into, when possible, a reciprocal relationship of, is there any way that I can be of assistance in helping you with your different endeavors or events or foundation or whatever it might be. So that was the turning point for me, was creating that list, connecting with a very powerful now network of beautiful humans.
Obviously working in social media, 10, 12 years ago, that basically meant you were on Facebook and Tom was your friend on MySpace, and that was about it. Now it's seemingly every couple of months that there's like, okay, well, now there's Clubhouse, and now there's this, and now there's Twitter Spaces. And how hard is it to keep up with all of the different things that have come up as far as platforms in social media?
Yeah, there's a running joke social media community on Twitter, and it's like, when you see job descriptions that say 15 years experience in social media, it's like, well, who are you, Jack Dorsey? Like, there is no way anybody has that.
Except for Tom from MySpace.
Except for Tom from MySpace or Jack Dorsey from. So it's hard. And there are days where you, like when TikTok came out, I'm like, you have that, you weigh it. Okay, is this like Vine? Is it going to last a few years? I don't think it will. Unfortunately, I think TikTok is here to stay. But even now, like during COVID, TikTok, Clubhouse, then this other one, Dispo came out like a few weeks ago, and I was just getting the hang of Clubhouse, and I'm like, oh, for God's sakes, like now what is it? Let alone the algorithms and the platforms that we exist on already changing every single day. It's hard. But do you know what gives me hope is that brands and companies that are now recognizing the value of a social media team will no longer require people to be experts in all of them. The ultimate dream social team down the line, let's hope here in the next 1 or 2 years, brands really catch on to this in a big way. They have a person dedicated per platform. It's no longer one human being with their head about to explode, putting half-assed content on everything as opposed to tailored content per platform. And I think that's going to be a really important shift. You already see it. College basketball teams, they get it. NFL teams are pretty good at getting that. Hockey, we have a ways to go. But I think that will be the difference maker to see what brands really grow and embrace as opposed to think it's still 15 years later off the side of someone's desk.
Of all the new spaces that have come up, like Clubhouse, like Twitter Spaces, like the Discord or whatever it is, do you see any of them becoming like the go-to place as far as, you know, conversation or promotion goes? And how many of them do you see just like, that was a fun 5 minutes?
Well, there's a lot of conversation around Clubhouse after COVID is over, if our lives ever go back to any kind of normal. Clubhouse, and, you know, once we're outside in the summer, Clubhouse isn't a thing. I'm not so sure. I really love Clubhouse. I think there's a lot of value there. It can really be an awesome community generator. But is Twitter Spaces the same thing? And is Twitter Spaces going to use the strength of what Twitter already is to really be that one place you go for everything? I am not in the gambling world, so I wouldn't want to bet on what platforms will or won't be in existence even 6 months from now. But when you look at the mega ones, it's interesting. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg might be listening into our conversation here because I'm about to diss Facebook. Facebook is one, we're all on it, and brands know it's important, and the engagement rates continue to be there, but it's really a mystery because personally, you ask around and a lot of people in my sphere are over it. And so we know we have to contribute to Facebook and be really strong and have a presence there. But that one is a mystery, and I don't know how it's going to shape. And obviously it has its legs into Instagram now too. I don't know how that will look in the next, who knows, year or two. But it's a bit of a dark horse, I guess you could say.
To draw an analogy when it comes to social media, you can almost kind of look at streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Crave, like these all encompassing, all genre kind of platforms. They're very much kind of like the Facebook and Twitter as far as streaming platforms go. Now you have these services that are almost genre specific or tailor made. It's like you've got Shudder, which is like all horror movies. You've got BritBox and Acorn, which are it's all British TV and movies. You have the Smithsonian, I think, has got one. You have all these ones, and it's become almost narrow casting. Do you see somewhere down the road social media going that way, where it's like you have, hockey book literally, or you have like, the Twitter of football, whatever they're going to call that? Do you find it almost like eventually it's going to be like, okay, well, if you like hockey, you're going to go on this one. If you like basketball, you're going to go on this one.
That's another loaded question. Because I love the notion of them all being in one place so that I can learn about and explore new areas that I may not be as familiar with. But I know I'm not the norm. So that scares me, but it also has infinite potential if it does go that way, because it will really force us to think about, hockey being my world, how can we grow the game if our audience is already a captive hockey audience? What does that then look like? How do we partner and get into other spheres? I think you see it a little bit now. Well, I'm just not so sure. You see, there's two areas. So there's that notion of athletes buying into media companies. And I had this discussion recently with someone, and I'm like, that's not certain athletes for sure buying into full-on digital media companies. Others, it's a website. Let's call it what it is. But these digital media companies, same kind of idea, right? If I want content from one athlete in particular, or that group of athletes and investors, or this theme, I'll subscribe here. But when is it going to, where does that stop? Are we always just going to subscribe to the one-off thing? How will those companies eventually like come together to partner, like what you're seeing even the fitness like Peloton doing, where you bring everything together into this one kind of area? The other thing that I want to talk about a little is Twitch, which is obviously massive in the gaming world.
It's huge.
But beyond. But with COVID, we saw that used in some really cool. So while I would have looked at that even a year ago and thought, I'm not a gamer, that's not my thing, I have no reason to be on Twitch. Now I've done spin classes on Twitch. Podcasts are starting to be live streamed on Twitch. So along with watching some of my favorite hockey players play video games on Twitch, there's all of these integrations and being brought together. And I think those are the services. And I again, I'm not a betting gal, but, and you might come back to me and go, yeah, you were really wrong. But I think those kinds of directions where it creates a community around, maybe it is one niche topic, maybe it's baseball only, you're subscribing to this channel or this platform, but it's got to be more than that. It's got to have that notion of community, of bringing people together, a reason to come on besides just watching the game, or, just the content, or just to get close to the athletes. It's got to be all of those in one.
You mentioned earlier in the podcast that one of the reasons that you wanted to get into this industry was to be a storyteller. Mm-hmm. When it comes to, dealing with someone, say of an athlete nature or stature, and you're like, okay, hi, I'm Madison. How are you doing? I'm here to help tell your story. How do you go about that process?
Start just like that. Hi. No. Again, galvanize is what I go back to, of really teaching me this craft. It's relying on me and what makes me, and knowing my story to then draw that out of somebody else and make someone comfortable. And I knew I had this as a skill my entire life, and ability to connect, but I couldn't put words to it or rhyme or reason. And I now know why, and I now know how to make that stronger. The human experience, to reveal any vulnerabilities, you have to be comfortable, you have to trust. And I think a lot of the time, media feels entitled to who a player is besides what they're doing on the ice or the court or the field. And that's not the case. And I understand that as a very protective sister. They don't owe media or the world at large anything about who they are as a person. Sometimes it's beneficial for them to share that, but to find the right person to open up to and not exploit any vulnerabilities that they might express is a careful process. So developing trust is number one. And I do that without revealing all of my secrets by being a human being first. And while that's a lot easier said than done, it's about developing that over time, you know. So, and how do you do that when you walk in and you've got 30 seconds in a scrum? Well, we're in a different world now where that's probably not the first time you've had interaction with that athlete. Through social media, they know, they're well aware of who their interviewers are. Players are coached now to do their research, just as media members are coached to do theirs. And so I hope that kind of gives you insight into just how I go about it, and how I approach it. I think, like, obviously preparation is the key, but so is just knowing who you are and knowing how to connect as humans.
How did you know? At an early age, everyone kind of gets that point where they're like, I think this is what I want to do. At what point did you know that you wanted to go into a broadcasting storytelling career? Like, what was that turning point for you?
Well, I wish I'd have not acknowledged it a lot younger than I did. But you know what started it for me was, again, if you're looking over my shoulder at James Duthie, it was reading his weekly column in the Ottawa Citizen. It was a weekly hockey column that I couldn't wait to open the paper and read. And it was his style, where it was funny, it was witty, it was humanized. That is what really launched it, that notion of, I want to do this. I want to be James Duthie too. I then went on this exchange to Norway in high school, and instead of telling everybody back home the same story 10 times, I wrote a blog, and it really caught fire. My mom was printing them out and distributing them all over town. Every time I would write one, my friends wound up like publishing it into a book for me after I was done. It was really a success. And the feedback I got there was like, you can really tell a story. You can really write. We all felt like we were there with you. So university happens. I had applied to the journalism program at Carleton. It was too close to home. And I'm a Queen. I knew from a young age, I was a Queen's girl through and through. So I went down that road, and you know, it trickles into different career areas and what are my job prospects going to be and whatever else. So as much as I say, I wish I'd have acknowledged it at a younger age and taken it more seriously at a younger age. But all of the things I did in that meantime, it's not like I sat and waited and didn't do anything. I built some really cool experiences that all come full circle and contribute to it. The other piece, as I said, when I knew I wanted to do the media side as opposed to working at Upper Deck and in athlete relations necessarily, that was a turning. Going to NHL awards, my first week of work, my first business trip was to Las Vegas for the NHL awards, which is just insane, and was really, really neat. But going to all of the NHL All-Star, it was the 100 year of the league that year, Heritage Game, like all these big events, and being amongst the storytellers and amongst the media personalities, that really firmed it up for me, and I decided I needed to continue to pave that direction more strategically and more intentionally.
You mentioned that you wrote a blog, way back when, and now you are a visual storyteller, or if you're doing a podcast or hosting something, you're an audio storyteller. Do you have a preferred medium for how you like to tell your stories?
Yeah, I like the power of video is beyond. Those are the moments where you really get the goosebumps, and I love that I'm continuing to work towards that direction. But written for me will always be what I think of first. And it's a little bit, I think it's nostalgia and old school, because now written entails so much more. It entails clipping audio to then make a motion graphic to accompany the story. With Zoom interviews now, it's probably clipping biz to put into a video component that plays at the top of the story. It's thinking about what visuals beyond just a header photo, or what tweets or what other pieces of multimedia are going to accompany the written piece. So I don't say that in saying like the other pieces don't exist, but written is where I love to paint the picture. I think there's so much power there in how you can really convey the human experience. And some of the stories that I've gotten to write, particularly while I was at Hockey Canada, just were incredible experiences to, again, build on what I've talked about at Infinite. It feels in this time together is to build on the human experience and the relationship there. So you can talk to somebody for an hour and you might use 2 lines out of what they said in your written story, but then how do you convey the rest of what they shared? How are you talking about how they made you feel, or how they told their own story? And I think that's the strength of it for me, and why I love the written medium.
When you're sitting down to write, whether it's a feature or a blog entry or whatever the case may be, what's your writing ambiance? Do you have like the lights low and the music on, or is it very much like, blinders and like absolutely dead quiet?
Yeah. Oh, I love that, because it's one of my favorite moments of productivity. I am a night owl when I really have something to do. And this goes back to university, like do today. That was where I thrived. I was in the library the night before, just pounding away at it. And I take a similar, though more prepared approach now. I love late at night. I blast the tunes, and it has to be songs that I've absolutely killed. Like I've played them over and over and over again, and I know the words, they're printed in my brain. It can't be a new song. It has to be a song that, again, I can just put on loop, blasting it super loud. It's usually pretty dark in here, and I pound away at my laptop with, again, these things that it's the things that I've thought about even before I've spoken to someone. Like I've often shaped, I've done the research. Here's kind of what I'd like to go with this story. Then you talk to them. Usually there's a first line. They write the story themselves. They give you the most powerful lines. You just need to pick up on them and listen to them. So when I'm sitting in this dark, kind of late at night space and pounding away at my laptop, I'm pulling all of that together. What direction did I think I wanted to take? What did they really give me? And how do they want it reflected? And then where can I kind of find that magic and add my own spin on it?
When you're listening to someone's story, when they're laying it out there all for you, as someone who has video production background, and that at some point you're going to have to add music to the finished piece, do you sit there and while you're listening almost hear the music you want to put under that soundbite?
Always. I always feel like and I feel like you're the same, Wes. We're always living in a movie. And for me, I'm always living in a romantic comedy. So when moments happen, I'm like, that song and what you just said is the opening scene of the biography of you, or that song is going to be so powerful under a really somber moment of you feeling and reflecting. I'm constantly living in that movie of whether it's somebody else's story I'm telling, what their life is, or my own. So,
do you find sometimes you struggle to find the right music to match the right tone for that part of the story?
Do you know what I struggle with more is licensing.
Can't use that song.
Not the answer you're looking for, but a very real problem in our business is, and I mean, Peloton just dealt with it today, finally, like a global billion-dollar brand just dealt with music licensing. A lot of times, and I face this a lot in former employers, no licensing. So you have to use stock music, and it just takes some of the intros that you see that I know you've cut, or the promos that you've cut on Sportsnet, some of the intros you see again to like the spaces that like college basketball, and the more that pop culture references get brought into our sport world and really solidify it as a cultural experience, those become, again, not priority, and mistakenly so, for smaller brands or teams that don't invest in that space or don't recognize the value.
And it can be really tough too. I mean, for anyone who, we talked about Twitch earlier being really huge. And I can't remember who it was that they had Metallica on. It was Blizzard. So Blizzard Entertainment, they were doing their BlizzCon online, and they had Metallica performing one of Metallica's songs. And because Twitch now has this thing where it recognizes the music right away and says, oh, well, that's copyright music, we're going to overdub it with like this, like really, ethereal, airy, copyright free music. So there's Metallica playing Metallica, and Twitch says, well, you can't play Metallica. And all of a sudden, you have Metallica rocking out, like literally rocking out. And it's like, doo, 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 doo. And it's like, that's not what they're playing. This is a new direction for them. It can be really, really tough. So you mentioned when you were writing, it's got to be songs that, like you've played to death, and, you don't even have to pay attention to them. What are some of those songs?
Well, those change with, like, when I say I've had to have killed it, like I have to have looped it nonstop for a couple of weeks because I love it and identify with it so much. So I did prepare a little list of the songs of me, and you maybe, well, you expect it, might be somewhat disappointed at how much country is on here, Wes.
I don't think I'll be surprised by how much country is, but obviously now we're at the point. So Madison, we need you to tell us, if you're introducing yourself to a total stranger and you can't talk, you just hand them a tape and said, the songs on this, these are the songs that are the soundtrack of my life. What's on that tape, and why are they there?
Like when your high school boyfriend would give you a mixtape to listen to road trip, and those were the songs that defined your relationship, right? These are the songs that are me forever, as in from the past and current. Number one, I'm reading here out of my this is written in stone. Number one, and it's the only one that I have numbered, the rest can come in any given order, but number one is Elton John, Benny and the Jets. And that is because my Dalmatian, who everyone knows well from my social media presence, is named Jet after the song. The song was featured in the movie 27 Dresses with Katherine Heigl. And there's a moment
for your rom-com fix.
For my rom-com fix, but also, if you were to ask me again, you could do 5 movies that sit on the shelf beside the Bible. It would be one of them. So there's a time in it where she and James Marsden get up on the bar and they're singing to Benny and the Jets. And it really became this power scene in our household, to the point that my brother and I would always reference we'd refer to each other as Benny and the Jets. When I got my pup, who's laying right here at my feet, he took one look at his picture and said his name's Jet. Like, he has to be. So Benny and the Jets is my number one tune. Okay. Maybe not for the song, but for what movie it's been used in. The country one next on the list, Ain't Always the Cowboy, John Party. It refers to, it's not, like it says, it's not always the cowboy that runs away. About kind of this like free bird lifestyle, that it isn't just the cowboy. Sometimes it's the cowgirl who gets restless, her boots get restless. And I think that's me, and always being in new spaces and trying to find what's new and next and happening along the journey of my life. So when I first heard that, it's kind of a newish song, like a year and a bit, really strongly tied to, I think, my life, my existence, and my beliefs. I probably have about 30 here, so I won't go through them with such detail. But the other one, what will I mention next? Okay, this one might hit you as a surprise. Michael Bublé. I've seen him 2 times live in concert and heard him speak. I spoke to a team that I was a part of recently. And Michael Bublé, it initially started, my grandparents, who were very close to and have been really influential in our lives, they loved Michael from the time he was just singing, in casinos or in really small venues, and they were following him around. And then he became a global sensation. And as I said, we've gone twice since. So Michael Bublé's Feeling, I could pick any song, but I'll pick Feeling Good because it's a real banger. But it really pulls me into those tight ties with my grandparents and what that has represented in our life. And he's just classic. I always say I was born in the wrong generation, and I love that Michael represents maybe different times that probably would have suited my heart a little bit better. I can't go on without mentioning Shania. That's why I wore this baseball shirt with Shania 2015. She played, it was supposed to have been, and I'm like her last hurrah, final tour of Canada. And we went to her out in a horse park, like big field near Ottawa. I was on my brother's shoulders for a solid chunk of the show. There were people were stomping their boots so hard that the soil was vibrating, like crazy experience. So Shania, we grew up on that. That just shaped, there's such female, like you go girl power to her in the 90s. And again, it could be any song. I remember at like 3 years old singing "Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under," not knowing what that meant. So I've identified "Party for Two," which is Shania featuring Billy Currington. That's just a all-time classic and the kind of love I'm looking for. I'll put that out there. But I also love "You Win My Love," where it's motorcycles and fast cars, a really awesome video. Another one, this one you might be actually impressed with, "Thunderstruck," AC/DC.
Nice.
So I've seen AC/DC twice because, again, this is my dad's influence now. But I picked "Thunderstruck" because that is what I remember of Saturday mornings in minor hockey arenas. "Thunderstruck" plays as a warm-up tune at all levels of the game, NHL right through to minor hockey. I can put myself in the Spencerville Arena, which is a super small town near home, eating a cinnamon bun, watching Slate play early in the morning on Saturdays. So that's why I've identified that one. And then Alabama, "I'm in a Hurry." That's another tune that I just remember Mom having on all the time. Again, country music. But it's like talks about I'm in a hurry to get things done. I rush and rush until life's no fun. And like back in the 90s, that was one thing. Now we need to listen to that more than ever, to really slow down and appreciate where our life is taking us, and the moments that we get to experience. As I said, I've got about 30 here. I've highlighted some.
It's the extended play cassette. It's all good.
It's got a couple versions. I've highlighted some of the big ones, but I think if I were to look at the whole list, some common themes would be like girl power, classic love songs. There's a lot of love songs going on here. Hopeless romantic. And then even some of the rock and roll tunes have to do with that notion of more and dreaming big, and the themes really that make my soul tick.
One of the really, really cool things that you mentioned your brother Slater quite a bit, and like I know that he has name dropped you on, I think it was Hockey Night in Canada one time, and it's, you guys seem to have like the most supportive brother sister relationship. How has it been, watching his career go from like, again, we mentioned from the Lightning to the Blackhawks to the Oilers and go through all of that. And then for him to be able to watch your career grow as well, working up to, and you were, recently in Hockey Canada. And now that you're in the same province finally for a while, how has that been, like that mutual support from both of you?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit about family support, but it's been integral. There's really nobody that gets it to the degree that he does, because we've had this fully shared experience. We always talked, we're only 14 months apart, and we always talked about wishing we were twins, so that we were in the same grade, and so that we could say that we were twins. But we really felt like we were, in that we shared everything. Like I guess maybe I was a bit behind and he was a bit ahead, but felt like we did everything at the same time. Whether that be skating or, learning a new sport or getting enrolled in new sports together until, that started to take off for him. But I think he is who has pushed me. At that time, it was pushing me athletically. But even to this day, it's him who pushes me to think bigger or to really realize my full potential. And you'll love this story, and I don't know if I've ever told it. When I was in the 6th grade, our town was putting on a production of Annie. And I was notoriously more shy than he was. So I would help to get him dressed up so that he could perform at family functions. And then I would stand in the corner and watch and laugh and carry on. But this time he didn't let me do that. He took the reins, and I wish we had a recording of him pushing me lovingly, and encouraging me to get the karaoke machine out and get the Annie tunes going, because there was no one else in town that was going to be Annie. I had to really own it. I was a shoe-in. I needed to get my butt to the audition. And so he would have only been in the 4th grade at that time. And lo and behold, I was successful in getting the role. And it was really funny after that. And it was a bit of a success. From a bigger town, they called looking for me to be Anne of Green Gables. And I remember hearing my mom on the phone, and I yelled in the background, "Tell them I'm retired."
I've done Annie, drop the mic, I'm done.
Tell them I'm retired, I'm done. But thanks to him pushing me to, again, see that potential. And that's not over. At this age, it's still the first person I tell absolutely everything to, or that I noodle new ideas with, or that we talk about the different sides of, the not so great sides of our business. And he really brings that perspective. I'm so grateful I had a brother, because it gives me a lot of perspective into how to value, it's really important to have male and female relationships in your life. And ours is just become this like a little bit more public, and both of us are doing really huge one in a million things. And I'm so grateful. I don't know that I could do it without him to constantly set the example as my younger sibling.
You also mentioned too in your list of songs, when we were talking about Thunderstruck, kind of part of that being your parents' influence. Did your parents always have music in the house? And do you remember what, young Madison would listen to when she wanted to listen to music?
No, like we're not the most, and I think we've talked about this before, Wes, where I'm like, I'm not cool, I'm not artsy, I'm not creative in that.
Says the girl who was in San Diego and Toronto. Yeah, no, not interesting at all. No.
I'm not cool like you in the music world. No, my parents, we weren't a music house by any means. We were a movie house. And a TV house. My mom still watches Young and the Restless every night after work. I'm sorry to out you, Mom, in admitting that. But those, I bring those up because music for us was in the car. It was driving to and from hockey, going to the cottage, or, again, listening to the radio in the car. That's what it was. I remember in the early days having like the Alvin and the Chipmunks tape in the Blazer, Chevy Blazer, the Space Jam tape. So again, like movies, and then the music that went along with that. And then, as I've said, Shania, of course, and Alabama, and some of those classics being on when we were putting around the house, and whatever else it might look like. But I bring up that we were a movie and TV house because I often reference that as being so important in the development of emotional intelligence. I really believe that like that appreciation for storytelling, but also of like watching a human experience, is what gave me the power to really listen and hone in, and read people.
I'm going to throw you a tough one here. Okay. 2-part question. One, as a storyteller, is there someone out there whose story you would love the opportunity to be able to tell, whether it be through a documentary or through a biography? And then part B is that if you had the chance to have anyone tell your story, who would you want to do that?
Yeah. I think that notion of whose story would I love to tell, I'm not ready to answer yet. And I say that thoughtfully, because I think we could sit here and say, you want to tell all the big gun stories, like, but they're being told. It's about finding that new angle and really developing a relationship. And I'm still in the process with some of my relationships that I'm developing where I wouldn't feel ready to do it full justice. And some of the things I know, about individuals or struggles that they've faced or what have you, it would be like an out right now if I said their name, and I don't feel in a position yet to really say that. All of that to say, there are some where I've had, so one in particular, and this is a super niche but so Albertan, chuck wagon racing is a massive sport and part of rodeo here, and a big part is Stampede. A town that I visit often and spent a great deal of the summer in, it's called Dewberry, Alberta, which is up by Lloydminster, that weird border town that's half in Saskatchewan, half in Alberta. The family that's like at the core and has been for generations of chuck wagon racing is from there. The sport is really from there. And I recently had the experience in the fall of sitting on the wagon. His name's Buddy Bensmiller. And Buddy is like the grandfather of chuck wagon racing, but he's so much more than that. He has this really fascinating background around finding horses and giving them a second chance and then winning championships with them. So it's one of my regrets that I didn't have my phone on record that day, but it's not the last chance that I'll have with him. Some of the things that it's a new world to me, the horse training and horse farming, and then obviously horse racing. But that's a story that I want to tell at some point. And I said to him that day, I want to spend a few days with you, record everything and write your book. But I use that here as the example, not as like I want to tell this huge star story, but because when you're listening, those stories are everywhere. There are incredible humans doing amazing things everywhere that have themes that will resonate with everyone. So I use that as the example.
And then, as we'll say, then as far as someone telling your story.
That was long-winded. Sorry, Wes.
That's okay.
Someone telling mine, this is what I would look for. This is how I would vet them, is authenticity, transparency, good intentions, an appreciation for what makes me, which is, I like to think, being a little bit unique, being a little bit weird, authentic myself, and that's totally okay. So off the hop, if I had to look at who in the industry really does that and embraces that, I'm going to look at our two Canadian female powerhouses, in Tara Sloan or Christine Simpson.
Okay, you mentioned concerts too, as you know, in your mixtape list. How much do you miss going to live concerts this past year?
I just said last night to a friend, I cannot wait to be at a concert or at a bar and bump into someone and have half my drink spilled down the front of my shirt. Like, I cannot wait for that moment. Calgary has such a fun scene with it's around country music. But also around hockey. The Saddle Dome is this unbelievable venue in terms of one of the oldest in the league. I think it's top 3 oldest, and a bit of a dump, but one of the best game or concert show experiences you would ever have. A lot of people equate that to the notorious Dome foam because the beer lines are so old. There's a lot of urban legends that the alcohol percentage is a lot higher, or that we're at altitude. There's all these different, I think it's just a great time. So one of my last shows was Luke Combs and Morgan Wallen at the Saddle Dome before all this went down. And to go back and do it over, I don't know that I'd do it much differently. It was a pretty fun night. But to be able to do that again here in the, I hope, near future, or who knows what Stampede looks like this summer or whatever else it may be, I cannot wait. Because obviously country music, as you know, you have your outfits for going to your shows. But country music, the boots that are collecting dust over there on the shelf, the jeans, the sparkle, all the outfits.
Well, I don't know if I put sparkle in my outfit, for the concerts that I go to. No, there's no sparkle in the pit. Okay, so one more question for you here, Madison. For someone who is looking to maybe not necessarily follow in your footsteps, exactly, but for someone who is contemplating, getting into broadcasting, getting into social media, getting into, sports media, going down that path, what would you say to them?
Yeah, and what I reference when I think about this is what people said to me. And I got a mix of don't do it. No, but also that's all, like, that is all good-hearted. That thing of don't do it comes from people who understand it is one of the hardest things you'll ever do and undertake. But the reward of doing so is so incredibly important and valuable that it is worth it and has been worth it. So I would tell, there's a couple of things, and with, you go through this, you don't ever make it. You never make it. You always go through these like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Because it's a nature of our bit where storytelling runs on emotions. They're going to get out of control sometime, where it's just up and down, up and down. And the persistence that it takes is unlike any other. Because I think in other industries, you can, find yourself in a place where you're making a ton of money, and that outweighs some of the harder parts of your business. Or there's a lot of stability, so that outweighs some of the things that maybe don't fulfill you totally. In sport, especially at the start, the money is nothing. It's very hard, and it's something I also want to change, because I think it's a huge barrier of entry for how people are valued at the beginning of their careers in sport. So I think, to get back to putting all of that in context to kind of answer your question, know who you are and what you stand for before you get into it. Like, truly know what you value, the areas that you want to grow and get better in, whether that be personally or professionally, and what you're willing to sacrifice. Because for some people, you might draw the line at missing your grandma's 100th birthday, or you might draw the line at having to move across the country 10 times, and that's okay. But know that before you get in, so that you don't come into this space with expectations that it takes a long time to meet, if ever. You really need an openness to know that the areas of possibility, especially now where it's shifting and you have to move and change at the times quickly, you have to have an openness to know, like, okay, I came into this because I love being a camera person, but now a lot of camera operation is robotic. So what other aspects can I contribute my skills and my passion to, that still see me in the space, but don't see me pigeonholed or like completely out of it? So that was long-winded and not super articulate, but I hope gives some context to just the kind of mindset to come into it with, in order to really avoid or mitigate some of those really hard aspects that come along the way.
Madison, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Where can we find you on social media, and how do we get a copy of you singing "The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow"?
Oh, I wish. I've asked multiple times. That is on videotape somewhere. And I've asked the people who had it, and I've never been successful in finding it. This is pre-cell phone days. So
see, now we just have to get you recording yourself today singing that song and put it out there.
Well, my brother and I did sing, there's a Together at Last, which is part of the play, not necessarily in the movie. We sang it at my aunt's wedding, and I know it will make a revival at one of our future weddings.
Amazing. So where can we find you on social media and get in touch with you?
Yes. My favorite, I'm a huge believer in Twitter, in the power to connect and the community that's created there. So at Madison Koekkoek, Koekkoek on Twitter, same thing on Instagram. And yeah, this has been awesome, Wes. I hope that my musical taste and all the talk about country music and chuck wagon racing doesn't turn your fans away.
You know what? I'm the one who just talked about wearing glitter in the pit. So, I think we're okay. Madison, thank you so much.
Any impact on you, Wes? I hope that it is that glitter gets integrated into it.
If I wear glitter in the pit, I may not be coming out of the pit. I don't know if that's a guarantee. Madison, much success, much happiness to you in the future, and to you, our listeners. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Made You a Mixtape podcast. If you're listening to us on any of the audio streaming platforms, you can watch this entire interview in video on YouTube. But if you're watching this on YouTube, hi. Leave a comment down below, give us a like, and then if you want to listen to it again, you can download us on any of the audio streaming platforms. This has been the Made You a Mixtape podcast. We will see you next time. Thanks so much.